My mom slept with my husband while I was hospitalized, so I took everything back. Please stay with me as I tell my story. And please, do not forget to support our channel by subscribing to our channel, liking our videos, and sharing your loved ones. Your support means the world to us. Now to our story. Poke. Imagine waking up in a hospital bed, weak and helpless, only to realize that the two people you trusted most in the world were secretly betraying you. That's what happened to me, and it shattered my heart in ways I never thought possible. My name is Sarah Miller. I'm 32 years old, and I thought I had built a life filled with love and trust. I was married to a man named David, and for years I believed he was my partner, my rock, my safe place. I also had a complicated but steady relationship with my mom, Linda. Despite our ups and downs, she was still my mother, and I thought she would always stand by me. I couldn't have been more wrong. It all began when I was admitted to the hospital after serious complications from surgery. The recovery was tough. I was in pain, hooked to machines, trying to hold myself together while feeling my body fight to heal. During those long days, I tried to focus on positive thoughts, telling myself that at least I had support. David came to visit, and my mom stayed nearby to make sure everything at home was in order. I remember feeling grateful at first, thinking, I'm so lucky. Most people don't get this kind of help. Linda moved into the house temporarily while I was in the hospital. She told me it was to make sure David wasn't overwhelmed by housework or lonely during the long nights without me. It sounded sweet and thoughtful, and in my fragile state, I clung to that idea. I thought my mom was being generous, stepping up in my time of need. I thought David was lucky to have someone by his side while I was away. Little did I know, the closeness they shared during those weeks wasn't the kind I had imagined. As I fought to regain my strength, they were forging a bond behind my back. Every time David left the hospital early, I assumed he was tired or stressed. Every time Linda told me not to worry and to focus on getting better, I believed her. I didn't question their late-night phone calls, the laughter I sometimes heard when David answered me while Linda was nearby, or the way they seemed strangely united whenever they came to see me together. My heart wanted to trust. My mind wanted to believe. But the truth was darker than I could ever imagine. While I was lying in a hospital bed, fighting to heal, my mother and my husband were growing closer in a way no daughter or wife should ever have to face. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. When I finally came home from the hospital, I felt weak but thankful. The familiar smell of my house comforted me, and I told myself things would get better from here. David carried my bags inside, and Mom fussed over me like I was still a child. At first, I appreciated her presence. Having her nearby seemed helpful because I couldn't move around as much as I used to. She insisted on staying longer to make sure I healed properly. I didn't see a reason to argue. The first few days passed quietly, but soon I noticed little changes that unsettled me. Mom didn't act like she was just visiting anymore. She settled in as if she lived there. She started cooking, cleaning, and even rearranging small things around the house. David didn't mind. In fact, he seemed to enjoy it. Whenever I mentioned that I could manage, Mom brushed me off with a quick, "Don't worry about it." It made me feel like a guest in my own home. David, on the other hand, was different. Before my surgery, he used to check on me constantly, but now his attitude felt distant. He still did things for me, but his warmth was missing. His touch no longer carried the same comfort. When I tried to talk to him about simple things, he often seemed distracted. He gave short answers, or sometimes none at all. I told myself it was stress, that maybe the whole hospital situation had worn him out too. Still, something didn't feel right. One night, when the house was quiet and I couldn't sleep, I heard laughter drifting from downstairs. It was soft, almost like whispers carried on the air. I recognized the voices, David and Mom. They sounded close, too close, sharing some private joke. My chest tightened, but I pushed the thought away. It's normal, I told myself. They probably stayed up to talk while I rested. Maybe Mom was keeping him company so he wouldn't feel overwhelmed. I forced myself to believe it, even though the sound bothered me long after it faded. Over the next few days, the same thing kept happening. I'd wake in the night to hear their voices downstairs. Sometimes it was laughter. Other times it was low murmurs that stopped the moment I shifted in bed. In the mornings, they always seemed cheerful when they spoke to me, but there was a tension in the air I couldn't ignore. When I entered a room, their conversations ended too quickly, and the silence that followed made my stomach twist. I tried not to overthink it. I told myself I was being paranoid, that recovery was making me emotional. Still, the unease lingered. It sat heavy inside me, like a shadow I couldn't escape. I couldn't explain why, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The thought kept pressing against my mind, no matter how hard I tried to bury it. One morning, I opened my eyes and felt an emptiness beside me. David wasn't there. The sheets were cold, showing he had been gone for a while. I lay there for a moment, listening for movement in the house. The clock ticked softly, and the quiet unsettled me. Slowly, I sat up, careful not to strain myself, and stepped into the hallway. As I moved toward the kitchen, I heard faint noises coming from the other side of the house. At first, I thought maybe David was fixing something or talking on the phone. But as I got closer, the sounds grew clearer, soft murmurs, mixed with a rhythm that made my heart pound harder. They weren't just ordinary voices. There was something secretive about them, something that made my stomach turn before I even saw the truth. I stopped outside the guest room door, my hand hovering over the knob. My chest tightened as the muffled voices became more distinct, followed by sounds I couldn't mistake. My legs felt weak, but I couldn't stop myself. With shaking fingers, I pushed the door open just enough to see inside. What I saw shattered me. There they were, David and my mother, in the same bed, entangled in a way that made the world tilt beneath me. For a second, my brain refused to accept it. I thought maybe I was imagining things, that my tired eyes were playing tricks. But no, it was real. My husband and the woman who gave me life, together without shame. The sight froze me in place. My whole body trembled, my throat closed, and a sharp pain spread through my chest. I couldn't breathe. My mind screamed at me to run, to cry out, to demand answers, but my voice refused to work. I just stood there, staring at the betrayal I never thought possible. They didn't notice me. They were lost in their own world, while I stood at the edge of it, crumbling inside. My hand pressed against the doorframe, trying to steady myself. I felt heat rush to my face, tears already filling my eyes. It was the kind of pain that went beyond anger, beyond shock. It was like something inside me had been ripped apart. I couldn't bear another second. Quietly, I pulled the door back until the crack disappeared, sealing away the scene I wished I had never witnessed. My knees gave out, and I slid down the wall into the hallway, covering my mouth so no sound would escape. Silent tears spilled over, burning as they ran down my cheeks. I sat there on the floor, shaking, hugging myself as though it could hold me together. My mind was blank, yet my heart screamed with betrayal. The two people who should have loved me most had joined in the cruelest way possible. And in that moment, I knew my life would never be the same. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. I stayed in my room, trying to hold myself together, but the weight of what I had seen pressed down on me with every passing minute. By afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed answers, even though I already knew the truth. When David came into the kitchen, acting as though nothing was wrong, I looked at him and asked directly, "Where were you this morning?" His face flickered with something, guilt maybe, but he quickly forced a calm expression. "I just went to check on a few things," he said. His voice was steady, but his eyes avoided mine. Before I could push further, Mom walked in. She glanced at me, then at David, as if she already knew what was coming. My hands shook as I asked, "How long has this been going on?" Silence filled the room. David shifted uncomfortably, his mouth opening and closing without words. Finally, he muttered, "I don't know what you're talking about." My heart burned. "Don't lie to me, David. I saw you. Both of you." The air went still. David froze, his face pale, but Mom didn't flinch. Instead, she tilted her head and looked at me with a coldness I had never seen before. "You were too busy being sick," she said, her tone sharp, almost mocking. "Someone had to make him feel wanted." Her words hit harder than any pain I had ever felt in that hospital bed. I thought betrayal from my husband would break me, but hearing my own mother speak like that shattered something deeper. It wasn't just infidelity, it was cruelty, spoken without shame. I turned to David, hoping, even then, for some sign of regret, some defense against her vicious words. Instead, he stood silent, staring at the floor, as if my pain was too inconvenient for him to acknowledge. That silence cut me just as much as Mom's taunt. My chest heaved, my voice shaking as I said, "Get out. Both of you. Leave my house right now." Mom rolled her eyes like I was being dramatic. She didn't argue, didn't apologize. She simply grabbed her bag and headed for the door, muttering under her breath as though she had nothing to answer for. The sound of her footsteps leaving echoed like nails against my skin. David, however, stayed rooted to the spot. His voice broke as he said, "Please, Sarah, don't do this. We can work through it. It was a mistake." I looked at him, tears streaming down my face. "A mistake? With my mother? That's not a mistake. That's a choice." His begging only made the anger in me rise. I pointed to the door, forcing strength into my voice. "Get out." In that moment, I felt something shift inside me. They had torn me apart, but I wasn't going to let them stay and destroy me any further. After throwing them out, the house felt painfully quiet. I expected myself to collapse, to scream, to break apart completely, but instead a strange calm settled over me. My heart was heavy, yes, but my mind began to turn in a different direction. I wasn't going to waste my energy begging for answers or chasing apologies that would never come. I decided in that moment that I would plan. The first thing I did was sit down with a notebook and go over every detail of our life together. David and I had shared accounts, investments, and property. He always believed I left the financial details to him, but he underestimated. I had kept records, bank statements, receipts, documents stored carefully in folders. That night, while the house was still, I pulled them all out and started reading line by line. Every dollar, every asset, every signature that tied him to me legally was now a tool I could use. When I felt strong enough, I made an appointment with a lawyer. I didn't tell anyone, not even my closest friends. I walked into that office quietly, like someone handling a routine matter. But inside, I knew this was the first step in taking back control of my life. My lawyer listened patiently as I explained what had happened. I expected judgment, maybe even pity, but instead he gave me clarity. He explained that because of David's betrayal, I had the right to file for divorce on grounds of infidelity. Not only that, I could claim nearly everything. The house, the savings, even his prized car. The law was on my side. Hearing that gave me a spark of power I hadn't felt in weeks. For so long, I had been weak, fragile, at the mercy of others. Now, for the first time, I felt like I had a weapon, and I was going to use it. But I knew I couldn't let David suspect any. If he realized what I was doing, he might move money around, hide things, or try to manipulate me into dropping it. So, I kept my mask on. When he called, I answered with a tired voice. When he showed up at the house, I acted unsure, as though I was still processing everything. I let him believe I was fragile, that maybe he still had a chance. On the outside, I was quiet, almost timid. But inside, I was steady and focused. Every time I signed another paper or handed over another piece of evidence to my lawyer, I felt stronger. I didn't need to yell or make a scene. My revenge would come not in words, but in silence, through actions carefully planned and carried out. For the first time since discovering the betrayal, I felt a sense of control. They thought they had broken me, but they had no idea I was building something far more powerful than anger. I was building my way out, and I was going to take everything back. I knew planning alone wasn't enough. If I wanted to make sure David couldn't slip out of responsibility, I needed proof. So, I started collecting everything I could find. I went through our shared phone records, highlighting late-night calls he made while I was in the hospital. I kept receipts that showed odd charges when I knew he wasn't with me. Even the small things, messages he left open on our computer, notes he thought he had deleted, I saved them all. Piece by piece, I was building a picture of his betrayal that no one could deny. Sometimes, when the house was too quiet, I remembered the nights I overheard him and Mom whispering. At the time, I forced myself to ignore it. Now, those memories became part of my case. I wrote down everything I remembered, every time they were too close, every time their laughter carried through the walls. My lawyer told me details mattered, and I wasn't going to leave anything out. Once I had enough, we prepared the papers. I didn't rush. Timing mattered. David had started reaching out again, pretending he wanted to work things out. I let him believe I was still considering it, that I might forgive him if he tried harder. All the while, my lawyer and I finalized the documents that would cut him out of my life for good. The day came when the papers were ready. I remember sitting at the dining table, steadying my hands as I signed. There was no fear, no second thoughts, just a strange calm, like I had finally taken the wheel after drifting for too long. When everything was complete, I handed them back and waited for the storm I knew was coming. It didn't take long. David showed up at the house a few days later, holding the envelope he had just been served. His face was pale, his voice shaky. "Sarah, what is this?" he asked, as though he didn't already know. I looked at him without flinching. "It's over. You'll be hearing from my lawyer." He tried to argue, his words tumbling out in disbelief. He swore it had only been a mistake, that he still loved me, that we could fix this if I just gave him a chance. But I didn't move. I had already given too much of myself, and I wasn't about to give him my future too. The demands were clear. The house, our savings, and his prized car. That car was his pride, the thing he polished every weekend as though it were a treasure. Taking it was deliberate. I wanted him to feel the weight of what he had thrown away. Watching his expression shift from shock to anger to helplessness gave me no joy, but it did bring a sense of justice. His choices had consequences, and now he would pay for them in full. For once, the cost wasn't mine to bear. It was his. It wasn't long before my phone started buzzing with messages from Linda. At first, she tried to sound regretful, but even her so-called apology felt empty. "I'm sorry things turned out this way," she wrote. But David was the one who kept coming to me. I didn't plan it. Her words weren't about taking responsibility. They were about shifting the blame. Every message carried the same excuse, the same attempt to make herself look like the victim. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She wasn't sorry for what she had done to me. She was sorry that it had come to light. The silence between us spoke louder than anything I could have written back. Meanwhile, word started spreading through the family. Secrets don't stay hidden for long, and soon everyone knew. Cousins, aunts, uncles. People who had once respected her looked at her differently. Some called me quietly to check in. Others admitted they couldn't believe she would do something so cruel. Her choices became the topic of whispered conversations at family gatherings, though she wasn't there to hear them. The shift was slow but clear. Invitations stopped arriving. Relatives who used to include her in celebrations left her out. Even old friends began keeping their distance, no longer eager to be associated with. Linda had always been proud of her social circle, but one by one, the doors she counted on began to close. She tried reaching out again, leaving long voicemails where her tone swung between guilt and defensiveness. Sometimes she pleaded with me to understand, insisting she had been lonely. Other times she accused me of ruining her reputation by talking about it. The truth was, I hadn't needed to say much. Her actions spoke for themselves. People saw her for who she was, and nothing she said could change it. For years, she had held a certain authority in the family. People listened to her opinions, trusted her advice, respected her as a mother and elder. That power vanished almost overnight. When she showed up to a distant cousin's birthday, she was barely acknowledged. Conversations shifted when she entered the room, eyes turned away, and she left early, humiliated. I didn't celebrate her downfall, but I couldn't ignore it either. Watching from a distance, I realized she had lost far more than just me. She had thrown away her dignity, her respect, and the role she once cherished. She had chosen betrayal, and it had stripped her of everything she valued. I had thought losing a daughter would be her deepest punishment, but in truth, it was the emptiness around her that cut deep. The family she once leaned on now kept her at arm's length. The friends she once bragged about had faded away. She had traded loyalty for a fleeting mistake, and the cost was a lifetime of isolation. David had always carried himself with confidence, almost to the point of arrogance. He liked to believe he had everything under control, our marriage, our finances, even the image he showed to others. But once the divorce papers were signed and the assets divided, that image began to crumble. Losing the house, the savings, and the car he cherished hit him harder than he expected. I heard from mutual acquaintances that he had moved into a small apartment on the edge of town. It was nothing like the home we once shared. The man who used to take pride in every detail of his life now lived in a place that reflected the choices he had made, bare, cold, and temporary. He tried to come back to me more than once. One evening, I opened the door to find him standing there with tired eyes and an expression I had never seen on his face before. Gone was the arrogance, replaced with desperation. "Sarah," he whispered, "please just give me one more chance. I can change. I'll make it right." For a moment, I looked at him and almost didn't recognize the man I had married. But then the memories returned, the nights of distance, the whispers with my mother, the betrayal I could never erase. Without a word, I shut the door. The sound of the latch clicking was final, like a line drawn in the sand. He knocked again, begged through the wood, but I didn't answer. That was the last time I saw him at my doorstep. His troubles didn't stop there. At work, his focus had slipped during the months he spent covering up his affair. He had missed deadlines, ignored responsibilities, and now the consequences were catching up. A man who once walked into meetings with confidence now faced questions about his reliability. Opportunities that might have been his slipped away, offered to others who showed more discipline. Piece by piece, the life he had built around control and pride began to fall apart. I didn't need to interfere. He was doing it to himself. The choices he made in secret were now laid bare, and there was no way to hide from it. For me, there was a strange sense of justice in watching it unfold. I didn't smile at his downfall, but I also didn't feel pity. He had gambled with everything that mattered and lost. While I was learning to heal and rebuild, he was facing the collapse of what he thought he could never lose. His betrayal had cost me tears, trust, and time, but it also set me free. Now, as I watched his world unravel from a distance, I realized he was finally paying the price, not just in money, but in pride, in stability, and in the image he valued above all else. The day I moved into my new home, I stood in the doorway for a long moment just taking it in. The walls were bare, the rooms quiet, but it was mine. Every corner represented a victory I had earned, not a gift from anyone else. I had taken back what was rightfully mine, and now I had the chance to start over in a space untouched by betrayal. Unpacking felt like more than putting things away. It felt like reclaiming pieces of myself. I placed photos on shelves, set up furniture, and carefully organized my belongings. Each step reminded me that I wasn't living in someone else's shadow anymore. This was my place, my restart, and I intended to fill it with peace instead of pain. Still, even with the comfort of a new beginning, the wounds were deep. I decided to start therapy, knowing I couldn't carry the weight of everything alone. Sitting across from someone who listened without judgment gave me a release I hadn't realized I needed. Week by week, I learned how to let go of the guilt I didn't deserve and the anger that kept me awake at night. Therapy didn't erase what happened, but it gave me tools to handle the scars without letting them control me. As time passed, I reconnected with old friends I had drifted away from during my marriage. Some of them admitted they had worried about me, noticing how distant I had become over. Spending time with them felt like breathing fresh air again. Coffee dates, long walks, and laughter-filled spaces that had once been occupied by silence and doubt. I also began to build new routines for myself. Early mornings with a cup of tea on the porch, late nights with books that inspired me, and quiet weekends spent exploring small shops in town. Little by little, I filled my life with things that reminded me of who I was before pain tried to reshape me. These weren't grand gestures, but they were steady, healing steps that brought back my sense of self. Every so often, I caught myself reflecting on how far I had come. There was a time when I thought betrayal would break me forever. But here I was standing, living, and even smiling again. One night, while journaling, I wrote down the words that had been circling in my mind. They thought I'd stay broken. But instead, I took everything back. My freedom, my strength, my... Those words became a quiet promise to myself. No matter what had been taken from me before, I now held the power to protect my future. The past was painful, but it no longer owned me. My life was mine again, and for the first time in a long while, I truly believed in the road ahead. Months passed, and life began to feel lighter. The sharp sting of betrayal no longer ruled my days. Instead, there was a calmness in the way I moved through life. I had built routines that gave me peace, surrounded myself with people who valued me, and created a home that felt safe. I was no longer the woman broken on a hallway floor. I was steady, independent, and stronger than I had ever been. One sunny afternoon, I decided to take a drive through a part of town I hadn't visited in a long time. As I turned a familiar corner, my old street came into view. I hadn't planned to go there, but curiosity carried me forward. Slowly, the house I once called home appeared. That's when I saw it, David's car, sitting crooked in the driveway, hood popped open. He was nowhere in sight, but the state of the vehicle told me enough. It looked worn down, neglected, nothing like the shining machine he used to polish with pride. My eyes moved to the porch, and there she was, Linda. She sat hunched in a chair, her face older, her expression bitter. The confident, sharp woman I once knew looked smaller, almost defeated. For a moment, memories rushed back. The pain, the disbelief, the night I found them together. But just as quickly as those feelings came, they passed. I didn't slow down. I didn't roll down the window. I didn't stop to give them a piece of my mind. Instead, I kept driving, hands steady on the wheel, a quiet smile forming on my lips. That smile wasn't about their suffering. It wasn't about revenge or satisfaction. It was about me, about knowing I had moved on, that their choices no longer had the power to reach me. I had once feared I would never escape the shadows of what they had done. Yet here I was, passing by the wreckage of their lives while mine was filled with peace. As the house faded in my rearview mirror, I thought about everything I had survived. Betrayal had shaken me to my core, but it hadn't destroyed me. It had forced me to rebuild, and in that rebuilding, I found strength I didn't know I had. I whispered to myself, almost like a promise, betrayal can destroy you, but only if you let it. I chose to rise, and in the end, I took everything back. With that thought, I pressed my foot on the gas, leaving the past behind once and for all. The road ahead was open, wide, and mine to claim. And this time, I was driving toward a future no one could take away from me.